Hello, everybody, and welcome to Evening Vibes. Hello to Darren, who just commented, "What is this?" This is Evening Vibes. It is Boylesque, Michigan's weekly Wednesday night talk show. It takes place at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we're just here to have a good time. It's a chance for you to sit back and relax, even if it's just for an hour. To take everything you've been feeling for the day, and just kind of let it go. I will start by saying that today's episode is a little different than ones we've had in the past in the sense of content. We will be discussing a lot of content that is considered for mature audiences. Um, and while we're here to have a good time, we're also going to be talking about it in a serious sort of like a mix. It's a mix. It's topics that people are uncomfortable talking about, but we are here to talk about it, and I'm excited to talk about it today with our special guest. It's going to be a good time. Um, so again, thank you all for joining me today. Hello to Julie, M, Jenna, Patrick, and Susan, Wendy, all the usual suspects, Kevin. Um, Hello. Feel free to put, for those that are new and those who are returning, feel free to put in the comments how you're feeling today, how you're doing, how your week has been, your month, your year. This is your time to let us know how you are. And then again, just let it go for the next hour. So you can also feel free to share maybe why you're feeling the way you're feeling. Totally up to you. But we're here creating a community here on Evening Vibes. So welcome if you're new to the community. Welcome to the community. Hello, Jen Martin. I hope you're doing well today. Hello, Eli. Eli commented on one of my posts today that they were very excited for today's show, and I knew that they would be. This is in their wheelhouse, so I'm very excited for them and for all of you to experience the show today. Um, I can see our guest has joined us. Hello. They can't see or hear you. I can just see you, but I'm very excited. It's been a stressful week. I'm sorry. I hope that your week gets a little bit better. I know that you're getting close to graduation, so that's super exciting. You'll see scrolling across the bottom here is my tipping information. I use it for the tips that I receive. I use for the show. It goes right back into the show for our technology that we need for this show as well as our weekend shows. I also used any money that I receive to thank my guests for being here. I send them a little thank you note and a gift as well from a local shop in Ypsilanti. So any money that I receive is always super appreciated and goes right back into the show itself. Well, with that being said, I think we're ready to get started. I know you kind of just joined us. Can you give me a thumbs up or do you like need some time? You're good? Okay, cool. So everyone, please welcome to the screen. I'm very excited. The one and only Emerson, everybody.
Hi. Thanks for
Hi,
having me.
of course. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Yeah, I'm
Good.
excited to be here.
We're excited to have you. I'm excited for today's topic. Do you want to do like maybe a little intro of yourself before we get going?
Sure. Yeah. So Emerson, they, them, and I am a psychologist in private practice in Ipsy. I do research at University of Michigan. I have been polyamorous for a long time, and yeah, I'm happy to be here.
We're happy to have you. Thank you. So, like I was saying before we got started here, is today's content for everyone knows is a little more mature than what we usually talk about on the show. But I'm very excited for it, and I'm excited to create conversation. I'm so here for all types of conversation. So we're going into the day with open minds, open hearts, and as always, you're always welcome to ask your questions in the comments section. If it's something that neither of us want to answer, we may acknowledge it or we may just keep going depending on it. But there are also no bad questions out there if you're being genuine. So
Definitely.
So what got Emerson involved with today's show is that you're actually doing a workshop on this subject coming up, correct?
Yeah, next month I am doing a hour-and-a-half training for social workers, and they'll get to earn CEUs. And so I'll be talking about this topic. Many of the social workers coming deal with clients who are under 18. So I've been trying to develop some things to say for those folks, as well as those who work with adults. And I was running it by Riley, and he's like, "Hey, want to come do a little practice run?" So
Yeah, we're helping with practice run and also helping with research to see
That's right.
what areas they may have missed in for their practice and for their upcoming workshop. So I'm excited.
Yes, I am mostly in a queer kinky bubble for most of my week. So as I've been developing the workshop, I'm like, what do I need to explain? What do people not know?
And maybe for those that don't know, I actually haven't said what today's topic is.
Oh, okay, great.
No, this is a perfect moment to introduce it. Would you like to introduce what it is we're going to be discussing today?
Yeah, so I'm going to be talking about ethical non-monogamy. You may also be more familiar with the term polyamory and kink.
Yes. So Jen Martin put in the comments, I need CEUs. For those of them that need CEUs, is your workshop something they can still sign up for?
Yes, and I can get you the link. So it's through a program called CHI, which is a grant-funded project for community mental health. So,
Awesome. Cool. And is it free to sign up for?
I actually am not controlling any of that, so I will have to defer.
Fair enough. That's valid.
I think it is, but I don't know.
So with getting started on today's topic, I think it's very fair to start with the basics because I mean, everyone I think in the audience is in different areas of the spectrum of what they assume of polyamory and kink culture and what they may actually know or lack thereof.
Yeah.
What is a basic definition? Let's start with polyamory because it's a little less scary for some. What's a basic outlook on polyamory?
So at its core, you're choosing to have romantic and or physical relationships with more than one person. So most cultures have a standard of monogamy, which is a one-to-one little dyad going on. And in polyamory, you can have as many or as few humans as you would like within your relationship circles. And some polyamorous relationships, or ethically non-monogamous is sort of the more general term, can be fidelitous. So people can be faithful to one another within that arrangement, just like we're more familiar with monogamy. Or they could be open, where they're just kind of open to whatever. Maybe more commonly, people would think of as just dating. But these are relationships in which there's commitment, various commitment levels, and various levels of engagement and intimacy.
And it's all about, from my understanding, it's all about like consent and communication.
Yes,
like those are
a lot of talking.
A lot of it.
I
know a very big misconception of polyamory is that doesn't happen, or those that maybe are experiencing it for the first time, they think they don't have to talk about it with anybody. They're just like, oh, I'll just have like all these multiple people and we'll just won't ever mention it.
Sure, avoidance is always an option. However, I think if you want to get the most out of your experiences, then transparency and vulnerability usually work out better for everyone involved.
So with that in mind, how does that play into kink culture? Like, what is the basis there that kind of put the two together for you to want to talk about them?
So I think there's a lot of overlap in the two communities. I think once you start moving outside of the monogamous relationship structure, these folks do tend to be a little more open and seeking of new experiences, new relationships. So that can lead itself towards kink. Also, I find that when you're engaging in multiple relationships, whatever baggage you have in your life is going to come up now. Instead of just one fold in your one relationship, it's going to show up multiple folds in your other ones. And some people use kink and non-monogamous relationships to work on those various triggers or issues that they have, and then they can really grow. One thing about monogamous relationships that I find difficult to work with therapeutically is it's a closed system. So you've just got these two people, and it's really easy to kind of get into a cycle where maybe one person's avoiding or running away and the other person is chasing or being anxious. And when you start adding in a third, fourth person into the mix, it's easy to break up those unhealthy habits or just those habits we don't like about our ways of relating. And so we can really start to challenge and grow and see other ways of relating because you're getting more relationship data. So
You're very much into data and research.
yes, yeah, that's definitely my thing.
Is
Yeah,
that your attraction to polyamory, or that's just like a bonus?
I think it's a bonus. Mostly I became polyamorous because I just couldn't be monogamous. So I gave it a try. I was a little miserable, and I just felt like I was missing out on some experiences that I really wanted, but I had to get over some mental hurdles of what I was really allowed to have. Did I deserve to have this much happiness or this much love? So those were my issues that I worked out early in my polyam life.
And I think a really big question that people have with polyamory, because I see it all the time, like in other people's videos, in like art, like opinion articles or what have you, blogs. The biggest thing is like jealousy with polyamory. Is that I think there's an assumption there that either one, you just have to be not a jealous person and just like you're just like stone cold to jealousy, or it's just like it's always there, and why would you want to deal with that? You know?
Yeah. So I would say in the last 10 years of clinical experience, this has basically never come up. So it amuses me that this is what the culture at large worries about. Like, what do you guys do about jealousy? And yet, when they're on my couch, like, that's not the problem. So that's just a piece of data for you. As far as what happens, so I will say people do talk about jealousy on the couch, but it's usually not in the terms of a group setting. It's just recognizing I have this emotion. And with jealousy, we can look at I'm probably missing out on a need I have. I have an unmet need, and I'm seeing that person give what I need to someone else, which is different than envy, where you don't want that other person to have it. You want it for yourself. So I do think jealousy comes up, but it helps us recognize what our own needs are. And then there's that transparency and vulnerability piece again, where now I have to go to that person and say, I have this need. And then they have the option to meet it, or they could choose to help me find someone else to meet it, or just punt back to me and tell me to go figure it out. But at that point, we've been able to have a conversation, and it's not anything about their actions because they're not doing anything wrong. I'm just having a feeling about it.
Right. I think I love I love to know that that's actually not a big thing. Because again, that's always the biggest thing that's talked about. I know
Right.
When I was seeking to like be in a relationship with someone, and they were like, I don't know if you would be into this, but I'm polyamorous. And me doing my own research and not wanting to like burden them with all my questions, that was like, thing after thing that popped up is how do you deal with jealousy when like X, Y, and Z happens? So while we have so many written pieces on it, it's not actually the biggest concern in the world in
And maybe because they
existing.
read everything.
Maybe,
There's not something written about the other topics, so they have to come talk to me about those.
Maybe that's it. With kink culture, so let's get into the nitty gritty of kink culture.
I don't know. Is it late enough? We said we were gonna like.
No, let's just dive in.
Okay, I'm ready.
I'm trying to think of like a good starting ground for like what is. I should have taken notes when we like talked earlier about starting ground.
Well, I can. Yeah, so let me start with what I'm going to say in the presentation. So,
perfect.
I of course, being a researcher, asked people registering for the webinar to fill out a baseline survey, a little registration form, asking them what terms, if any, they were familiar with. And this was just, again, for me to get an idea of what do I need to go over and what is more commonplace in the culture. And so 100% of the respondents so far are aware of dominant submissive relationships or master-slave relationships. And almost nobody was aware of some of the other ones like contra-prey, or they just weren't familiar with some of the terms like rigor and bunny for rope play. So for the most part, it seemed like over half of the more common options within the kink community were just not things that were on people's radar as options to explore. So I'm hoping that through this talk and through the talk next month that people will just be open to additional ways of gaining intimacy with one another and thinking about what they might be into. And then there was the red, yellow, green thing, which we had talked about, but I know you wanted to ask something. So
no, what I was gonna ask was oh shoot, it's there. Wait. Oh, that's what it was. So with polyamory, we mentioned like the biggest like assumption with it, and then that obvious then debunking that within like 3 minutes of like that's not true.
Only on my couch.
That's how we just know you're really good at your job. If you're looking for somebody to talk to, there you go. With kink culture, I think the biggest assumption is that it's like, or at least it seems to be a big common view looking at kink culture. Like it's gross. We don't talk about it. It's not a valid way to look at intimacy because it could be like harmful. That's like a very common thing I feel that we see in like media, either like within like film. It's like either the characters are super when it's like a sexual moment, they're super into like the kink moment, or like the person's looked down upon because of the kink moment. I guess what with this workshop that you're doing coming up, what the research you've kind of done on it and your own experience with it, what are your feelings and thoughts behind that? Is that a valid like statement question?
Yeah, no, I think I can say something to some of that. So I think it's a disservice to kind of that play and escape part of us that we don't grow out of when we become adults. So there's something that happens in our culture where somehow when you become an adult, this idea that you're allowed to play is not acceptable unless, I guess, it's in certain situations. Like if you're playing a game, like you're going bowling, or if you're playing with your kids, fine. But, don't dance in the living room kind of idea. And I think a lot of people use kink as that outlet to be able to play, to be able to experiment, to be creative in a space that doesn't really matter at the end of the day as far as productivity or your career. And at the same time, you can be using it to build intimacy, to heal various triggers or traumas, to explore what you want, to explore what you're capable of, and to feel yourself go to the edge of something and and feel that strength that you have in you that you didn't know you had.
Where does the word kink originate from? How does that come into play?
Oh.
You don't know?
I don't know. I guess I could look it up. I didn't get into the history as much in my research so far because I've been trying to focus on where people want to take it with the workshop in their clinical practice, but also just in their lives. Thinking about that red, yellow, green thing. I have heard that might have started back with some of the like handkerchief culture that we had. I guess I don't know how familiar people are with that, but you would wear different handkerchiefs in different pockets of your body to signal what you were looking for and what you were offering as far as physical acts for when the bar closed. So back when gay bars were still a thing.
Oh
So,
no. Rip gay bars.
yes. So one of the things I'm asking folks to do is to think about what we often refer to as a red, yellow, green list, or hard no, soft no, and hard yes list. So these are actions, words, could be pet names, anything that you feel you definitely don't ever want to hear in your presence, things you might hear if you're in the mood, and things you pretty much always want to hear. And before I interact with somebody new in my personal life, this is always a conversation we have before things get too far along. You know, what are your pet names for your red, yellow, green? What what triggers do you have? Do you have any signs of when that trigger might fall into a yellow versus a red category? So just being able to have these kind of conversations helps you get to know people better as well.
At what point is there like a non-awkward point to have that conversation? Like, because for someone that is experienced like yourself of having the conversation, I feel like it would be like, boom, okay, time to have conversation. But like for the other person, if they're not used to that conversation, do you ever have an experience where someone just looks at you like you're nuts? Like, why are we having this conversation? I thought we were just like gonna get it on real quick.
Yeah, I think I probably usually bring it up if I'm talking to somebody new online, within the first week. Like, I have a pretty high desire to engage in these kinds of activities. So that's something I'm looking for. So for me, I'm going to bring it up quickly. And if they are hesitant, then that's just not someone I want to date. That we could be friends or something else, or maybe we could date later. But just as far as what I need right now, it's pandemic life. Like I don't want to be helping someone explore from scratch. I'd like them to have some sense of who they are and what they like, but that's just where I am, partially because I do therapy half the week and it's easy for me to slip into that headspace. So I try to create boundaries that help me stay where I want to be when I want to be there.
That's totally valid. Like you do the coaxing through for a living. You don't want to just also have to do it with all your partnerships.
Exactly.
So how do you have any data that has talked about how common it is that people are into into kink culture? Like, is it like a fairly common thing and just a lot of people aren't talking about it? Like, do you have any data that speaks to that?
Yeah, so the New York Times came out with an article fairly recently looking at people's sex lives over the course of the pandemic and how they've changed. And so prior to pandemic life, the average American was having sex once every 7 to 10 days. And based on the research team, I'm going to assume that this was PIV sex or PIA, not the lesbian definition, which is if anybody tried to or anybody did get off, you had sex. So I'm pretty sure that this was not the definition they were using, but regardless, the pandemic data shows people are having sex more frequently and they're engaging in new acts. So there was a survey that went out that said, like, have you tried something new? Have you, purchased any new toys? Have you engaged in various different things? And people are starting to say yes. So it looks like maybe a little over half have experimented in some way, at least according to this one survey. And I think for people that have been together for a really long time and you have some deep intimacy there, it can be easy to experiment with, some more of the light level kink. So maybe you're not getting into a full scene, or you're not getting other implements involved, but maybe some breath play, or I feel like a lot of people have done something, a toy or two. So
What is, for someone that wants to feel either validated in what they're experiencing, feelings towards kink, or for maybe that someone wants to like learn about it for themselves, but they don't know like where to start. Do you have resources for that?
So I have a couple websites I use for like glossary of terms and information, and then there's a couple books that I don't love. So I have some resources I use. I'm hoping to not have to write something. I'm hoping to find something I like out there a little bit better. I do think some people's fears of what they're going to find when they start researching, like they're afraid to just do an internet search for bondage. Like, what am I going to find? And I think that's
Right.
legitimate. There is some stuff out there that's kind of creepy. So I think if you're just looking to do a general internet search, starting from a queer safe space is a safer place to start than starting from just a blank internet search. And then I think looking at university research, there's and grant funded research, there's actually quite a bit out there on, how to do something safely, how to, if you're going to tie someone up, make sure you have scissors nearby in case you can't get something untied quickly. Plan ahead like you would for anything else that involves some risk.
And something that we talked about earlier is at what point is it natural for humans to start experiencing well, maybe start basic, experiencing like
Yes.
sexual attraction and wanting to like experience is like starting to question it. What is a common, I guess, data wise, what is that age range?
Yeah, the common age is usually during the second stage of puberty or higher. So if you're kind of looking at the maturation scale that's on a 5-point scale, you start out at a 0 when you're prepubescent, and when you're a fully formed adult, you're at a 5. So usually somewhere around 2 or 3, people start to notice attraction, notice sexual feelings within themselves, starting to consider who they might be attracted to, how to explore those feelings.
And then
Have them, I should say.
and then at what point does it I don't know if this is the right wording, but it with that knowledge, at what point is it common that people often start feeling within kink culture? Is it like probably that same timeline, or is it like as they experience life and learn about it?
Yeah, so I think it depends on that definition that you're using. So if we're going to go with like the what you're afraid of definition of kink, that creepy guy dressed all in leather in the corner, whatever stereotype you've got going on, I think for that usually doesn't come until later. I haven't haven't really had anybody under 17, 18 that's talked about that. If we're talking about something like breath play, for instance, so do you like having your airway restricted or having that experience of not being able to breathe and kind of struggling? If you like that, you might see someone experimenting with that as a kid, pre adolescent. And so I I tend to look for those kinds of things over someone's behavior as they're talking to me. So I know we had talked a little bit of just that earlier. Riley and I had talked just a little bit about that masochistic energy that I feel like a lot of people have. And so somebody that is playing around with their airway or their breath at a young age, I'm looking for that person to display other tendencies towards having masochistic needs or wanting to explore kink. And I think if we can broaden this conversation so that people feel more comfortable talking about things that they want to try out, then they can have an outlet for that part of them that wants to self-flagellate a little bit, that wants to feel a little bit of pain. And I think that's a normal human experience. We're built to feel a wide spectrum of emotions. And I think it's great to want to explore all those. I encourage my clients to explore those in the ways that you want. Like, don't stay in that relationship that makes you miserable. If you want to feel miserable, go try something else. Maybe go do some impact play. Julie said something about handcuffs not being very fun. So, like, go get some handcuffs if that makes you uncomfortable, instead of staying in this relationship that makes you uncomfortable. So, I think people have these needs, and we're not necessarily talking about how to get them met because they're not quote unquote socially acceptable needs. But I think it's normal.
How would you envision kink going into media, like into film, into TV shows? Like, is that something that you ever see being comfortably addressed? Because I mean, we're just starting to like maybe sort of comfortably address like transgender in like film.
Right.
um
Oh, we're so far behind.
so
I
I
I
mean,
think it could. I think it could be something like maybe there are some props around, or maybe I don't see it necessarily coming into your evening when kids are awake time. Um, I'm pretty open with all of the kids in my life about physical things, about sex, about conception, but there's really nothing about kink that seems appropriate to talk about. And in fact, one thing I want to mention next month is it is illegal for an adult to talk to a person under the age of 18 about like providing them a link to a over 18 site or providing them some of those details. It's considered sexual abuse. So I really want to avoid that. Of course, if your child asks you a question, you're allowed to answer. So that is written into the legal stuff. I think I got sidetracked from your question though.
no, it's good.
Okay. So yeah, did you want me to say anything else about that?
No,
Okay.
I think that's good. I mean, with the I do have a question about that, what you had just
Okay.
mentioned, but going
Yeah.
back to the original question first,
Okay.
I think just I would envision that it would start with kind of what you said, it like just within a scene, you're just seeing like props in the background or maybe like conversation around it. I definitely don't think we
Yes.
would see like full on acts. Though some films have
Right.
gotten really close. I've seen some films where it's like, oh my gosh, are we watching them like literally have sex right now?
Right.
Uh, but those are like rated like R plus plus plus.
Yes.
But like with like a PG-13 film or maybe like a lower R rated film, I could see it like comfortably. Like there's just like some props like over on like
Yeah.
the dresser over here, or like someone is going on a first date and it's like as you were saying for yourself, like this is what I'm into. Is that what you're into? but
Yes.
making it like a normalization, not a shock value
Yeah.
moment.
Yeah, I think as the person bringing it up, because I do often initiate being female bodied, a lot of people I talk to online are not initiating those conversations with me because they're trying to not be creepy. So I will usually be the one to initiate. And I think feeling like that can now just be part of the conversation, and you can go in and out. You can be talking about some scene that you're really wanting to do or something that you enjoyed doing this week, while also throwing in like, this is what I'm making for dinner, and I'm going ice skating this weekend. So I like just having sex and kink be part of the conversation that I'm having. It's just a part of my life. It doesn't need to be hidden away in a corner with candles on, and it doesn't need to necessarily be on the dining room table.
Back to what you were saying about like those under 18.
Yeah.
How do you have any like suggestions or examples? Would you, I guess I should say, are you comfortable sharing examples or anything of how parents specifically could address those kind of conversations with like their children? Because I know growing up, there was a lot of adults in my life. Whenever I tried to ask questions around like sex or around body parts, it was just like even teachers, when we were having a full sex ed class, I had a whole 1 hour class dedicated to it for 9 weeks of the year, and, and no one wanted to answer my questions because
9
it made
hours.
the like so if you're comfortable sharing, what like tips would you have for those kind of conversations when kids start to ask like those hard, uncomfortable things about sex?
Yeah, I think for the most part, I've encouraged people to stick to honesty and facts. So, oftentimes kids are starting out asking questions just about how they came to be in the world and conception, and helping them understand. There's two books that I really love. One for little kids is What Makes a Baby, and everybody's multicolored, like the rainbow, or
Aw.
like there's a purple person and a green person, and they're all like amorphously shaped, and it's very factual. It's like there are three things you need to make a baby: sperm, egg, and a uterus. Done. And just about having that book available, it does like get in. Sometimes, depending on the kid that I'm reading it to, I might skip some pages towards the end where they're talking about delivery options. But then as the kids get older, we can read those pages. Basically, if your kid's letting you skip it, then I feel like they're not quite ready. And if they're like, wait, what did you skip? Then I feel like they're ready to learn more. So I just try to let them drive that conversation. And then for older kids, Sex is a Funny Word is a book I like. It's like maybe a 9 to 14-year-old level book that explains some of those things you should have learned in sex ed, and also from this inclusive stance.
I like the conversation that's happening over in the comments. Julie mentioned, and then Jenna brought like my thought into words. So Julie mentioned TV shows that bring up kink culture and have scenes around it.
Right.
Um,
And some of
and
them
at
have to
least
die.
right. And then to Jenna's comment, the stuff that I've seen from those shows out of the list, I mean, they were never like a positive like scene. Like Law and
Yeah.
Order SVU, like maybe the person, if it was the victim that was encouraging the BDSM scene,
Right.
like maybe they were like positive around them, like saying like it's totally valid that you're into it. He shouldn't have taken advantage of you. But like other than that, it was like a super unhealthy, like scary, like creepy man. One episode I recently watched was someone had it was literally OnlyFans because they always are doing SVU is always doing modern day topics. They're always trying to keep up with what's
Oh,
happening in the world. And so
okay.
they did an OnlyFans episode.
Hmm.
Um and one of the men, specifically a man, because it's often men within the show,
Yeah.
uh, and statistics. One of the men who was watching this woman perform in her OnlyFans found out her address, went to her house, and then raped her and said, "Well, you were always creating scenes around force. I thought this is what you wanted." And like, so that is how a lot of times we see kink culture in media is like
Yeah.
in that negative light of something. If you're the one that's encouraging it, it's not bad you're encouraging it, but just so you know, something negative will most likely happen to you. Eli also brought up pose. That happens a lot in pose.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because if you want people to feel like they are safe to explore things, which I think is a general value we have in this culture, then it feels like we want to leave space for things to go well. It's not as interesting of a TV show if things go poorly. As my 7-year-old has said about a lot of songs he hears, like, have you heard the lyrics to this, Mom? This person really needs therapy. But and then he'll say, but then I guess the song wouldn't be as interesting. So I think there is that aspect where it's more entertaining if something goes badly. If it goes well and everything was fine, well, then it's pornography. And if it goes badly, now it can be on TV. So I wish that wasn't the case.
Em mentioned, I feel they should only, I mean, it's talking about teaching sex ed in school, that they
Yeah.
should only start sex ed in high school. They shouldn't start any earlier. Would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, I think there definitely should be some easing into it. I think talking about full on PIV, PIA sex in 5th grade is probably too young for most people at that age. There are quite a few people having sex in middle school, certainly by lesbian definitions. So I think having that available to people to find information when they're ready. I think our public education system fails us when we're not all ready for the same information at the same time, whether that's sex or math. So I do think some information should be available in middle school. 5th grade does feel kind of young to me.
To Sarah's point, they happen to know someone who had already had sex by that age,
Yeah,
feeling necessary to have that conversation. And I
right.
mean, I agree because I've had friends throughout life, especially, I mean, not to stereotype, but I mean, if we're gonna talk about stereotypes, especially within like
Yeah,
the gay community, you don't
right.
have resources to LGBT plus queer sex, like
Yeah,
education around it. And so no matter what you learn in school doesn't matter. And a lot of,
yeah,
especially like queer kids start at such a young age because they're like, oh, well, that's not what anyone said sex was. So
yes.
I think just from my experience and what stories I've heard from others and with their sexual journeys and finding themselves, whether queer or straight, I mean, if they're gonna have sex at whatever age they have sex, like they're gonna have it, whether they have the info or not about what sex
Yeah.
is.
But we can help make it an experience for them that doesn't give them trauma, that
Right.
gives them something positive and helps them feel validated and getting their needs met.
Right. So yeah, I guess that's what I'm saying. If we are to start at such a young age as of 5th grade, like
Yeah.
let's not like I mean, I feel like the film I watched in 5th grade was like from like the 70s.
Yeah, I think I also had the same film.
And it was
From the
traumatizing on many levels. Found out later it was mostly because I'm transgender and asexual, but like
90s. Yes, it would be traumatizing for you.
putting the boys in one classroom and the girls in the other and being like, this is what your experience. And again, even as early as 5th grade, I mean, I remember my teacher wouldn't answer my questions. All I wanted to know, I had some questions. They make us watch a film about having, I mean, I guess we already talked about kink. We watch a film about having a period. So
Okay.
I ask a question about having a period, and she looks at me like I'm nuts. Like I should know. And I'm like, okay, in my head, I'm like, okay, well, my friend over here already started. So like, can I just
Yeah.
I
I
want to
don't
know.
know.
Like,
Yeah, I definitely don't know what is going on with those. Yeah, I also had a lot of people in my middle school that had babies, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. So, but the solution for that was to give a bunch of them Norplant. So we didn't actually like talk to them about, are they talking to their partners about what kind of protection they want to be using? Do they want this? It was just like the adults were like, well, we don't want another baby. So we'll just give you that.
right. Instead of teaching like safe sex, how not to get pregnant, they're like sex equals pregnancy. So
Yeah.
you're
Forget
screwed either
about,
way.
right. Forget about STIs or even your own enjoyment or physical needs. Most of us, I think, are familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and he does put sex in the bottom with food, shelter, water.
Mhm. I will say, I don't know about everyone else in the comments, but April I know is an elementary school teacher, and I mean just
Okay.
from a different point of view, not someone who's on like the third party looking in. I mean, as someone who's teaching in our existing school system,
Yeah.
even she's agreeing that it would be helpful to just start, as long as it's like the healthy like version of it, starting
Yeah.
that conversation early isn't always the end, like isn't always a terrible thing.
Yeah. I do think having conversations going from early on is helpful. And then, like I was saying about the Sex is a Funny Word book or the What Makes a Baby book, like you can flip past some of these pages, and then when you notice that they're ready for more, you can provide that. That's obviously easier to do on a small scale. So I think anytime you're talking about like what should American children know about sex, like, oh, I get nervous because trying to make something for that many people is going to be hard to tailor. But I think having things available, and they realize that it's something that they want and that it's a need, and they recognize it's something that's supposed to be good, but then we treat it like it's not good. So I think we do ourselves a disservice when we're not talking about it.
Right. And a big thing that I've talked about, I think, in multiple episodes at this point, is just being open to the questions that you receive, whether we start the education early or someday America is like, we're going to wait till high school to talk about it. Like just being prepared for those questions and having the open-mindedness when the question itself is presented. Because I think a lot of the harm that happens isn't always just in the education or lack thereof, but unwilling to talk about it. Just being hush hush, like, no, like, don't ask me that question. I don't want to talk about it. Like, you don't ask those kind of questions. It's inappropriate. And if it's an inappropriate time, teach them when it's the appropriate time, and then let them ask the question when it's the appropriate
Yes.
time.
Yeah, I try to provide as much information as possible about those things. So I'll say, okay, I'll answer that for you, but this isn't the kind of question that you just want to ask anybody. Or I might say, this, I can tell you some of that, but I can't tell you anything else. And then there's other things like your kid finding some toy, and it's like, yeah, that I'll tell you later, or you'll figure it out, but I can't. So, but I'm not saying I'm upset that you found it, or, we can use that as an opportunity to talk about, like, maybe don't just rifle through people's things and why that's inappropriate instead of getting off topic into what you found. But at the same time saying, like, I'm not opposed to telling you, I just don't think this is the right time. And, when you get older and this comes up again, we could talk about it then. And I think in general, the kids in my life have had enough conversations with me about enough different topics that they trust that they can ask me, and I may, in fact, tell them more than they wanted to know. But
reading April's comment, she's saying she experienced, I mean, shock and some sense
yeah,
of trauma from just not having any education about it at all.
right.
So that's
Definitely.
the other side of the coin when we're talking about how early are we willing to talk about it for children.
Yeah. And I think if we're willing to talk about it being an option, we also need to talk about the fact that this is not a universal experience like the overall monogamous culture teaches, where people want to be in a relationship with one person and they want to have sex with that person. So, talking about the aromantic, gray ace, asexual spectrum, and how that's also an option. You don't have to be on this other end. So I think we need to, if we're going to talk about it more, to also talk about it's okay to want to be vanilla. It's okay to feel like that I don't want to feel pain or whatever, and to be able to state what you like.
Yeah. I like that. I think that's something that gets missed a lot in these conversations and in queer conversations where we're trying to make allies like understand where we're coming from. I think a lot of time it'll come out as almost like you're a terrible person for not wanting this and not understanding it, when that's not the case.
Yeah. And I find a lot of people who are on the ace spectrum, they're either single or poly. I don't know any ace folks that are monogamous. I'm sure I mean, you, but that's kind of weird. So I think in general, I find a lot of them, probably over half, are into some type of kink play. And I think it's because it does really build that intimacy when you're having to really talk about consent and how far can I push you in this. You really need to be able to have a safe, transparent conversation. And everybody craves that intimacy in some way to varying degrees. And so, if just because someone doesn't want to engage in these specific acts doesn't mean they don't want intimacy. And so, being able to have a romantic experience, have an intimate experience, I think is very valuable.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. This was a
Thanks for
great
having me.
It was a great conversation. Do you have any like last things you want to say?
I really hope that all of you will go out and just have conversations with your friends, ask them what they're into, make your own red, yellow, green list. I think we can model having more open, transparent conversations.
And if for someone who's looking, just because you didn't plug it, I'm going to plug it for you. Someone
Okay.
who's looking for general just therapy, where can they go?
Wellspring Healing Center. I am on Facebook. And I
Yes.
have a separate website.
Emerson is an amazing therapist. Definitely check
Thank
them
you.
out. And obviously, they're queer friendly, they're open minded friendly. And it's just, yes, if you're looking for somebody who's also within a slide that offers sliding scale fee, also
Yes.
offers taking insurance, definitely
Yes.
check them out. It's definitely worth your time. Thank you so much, Emerson. It was great
Thank
to
you,
see you.
Riley. Yes.
I'll talk to you later.
Okay. Thanks. Bye bye.
Thank you all so much for joining us today. I hope you liked today's conversation. Um, it was, I learned a lot, and it was just great to get to catch up with Emerson in a different realm other than the therapy world. So thank you so much for joining. Don't forget, you can always tip if you're still watching. Tips go towards the show. It also goes towards thanking every special guest I have as I buy them a gift and a thank you card. Um, and I'm very excited for next week. Next week, we are celebrating all week long. We are celebrating the birthday of the one and only Jaden Black. If you don't know, Jaden Black is my other half. They are my best friend. They are my partner in crime. They are my everything, my life, my world. And they also run Boylesque, Michigan, which this show is streamed out of. It is a local Michigan drag group. And next week, all week long, we're going to be celebrating their birthday. So Jaden Black will be joining me next Wednesday, and we're going to do a whole show about them. It's going to be a lot of fun. I also have a lot of surprises for Jaden next week. So if you want to be in on the surprises, send me a direct message under Austin Moan or Riley J. Saronin on Facebook, and I will get you that information and how you can partake in a different surprise every day this next week. Thank you so much for joining me. Please check out our Friday show. We are continuing our celebration of Women's History Month by doing a night of women celebrity illusions. All of our drag queen performers are going to be impersonating different women that they find that are role models to them in their drag career. It is only $15 to watch. It is 100% virtual, so you can watch it from any place in the world, and is at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Friday. We are raising money for Safe House, a local Ypsilanti nonprofit who offers shelter and resources to those in need in the area. And they specialize in queer and women resources and needs. So please check that out. On Friday, you can purchase a ticket by going to the link that is pinned in the comments section. There is all that info there. What else is happening? On Saturday, we have our weekly family-friendly drag show, Learnings a Drag, where I do story time. Jaden does a music lesson. Hershey does um, a dance lesson slash stretching yoga lesson. And Ani Brieda does a cooking lesson. And that is free right here on Boylesque, Michigan, 11:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. That is on Saturday. Again, raising money for Safe House. Thank you so much for all the tips that are coming in. I really appreciate it. Shout outs to Sarah, Jen Martin, April, and Paul. Thank you so much for your tips. It's really appreciated. I'll get something really great for Emerson to thank them, and then I will put the rest back into technology for our shows. So thank you. I hope you all have a great rest of your night. Please take time for you tonight and also the rest of this week. Do something for you that is self-care. And within theme of the show, also do something to experience yourself in a new way, whether that is with yourself or with a partner that you currently have. Um, just know that you are loved and you are worthy of love. I'm always here to talk if anyone needs it. And I hope you have a great rest of your night. Good night, everybody.